I've been. Dreams are seeds we plant, my friend. Dusty boots, but a heart of gold. Your story's waiting to be told. Inventive journey, here we go. Through highs and lows, we let it flow. Startups rising, small but shine. Your time is now, your stars align. Cowbell ring and feel the beat. Hustle hard, don't take a seat. Every step you're blazing trails. Inventive journey never fails. Inventive journey, here we go. Through highs and lows, we let it flow. Startups rising, small but shine. Your time is now, your stars align. Inventive journey, here we go. Through highs and lows, we let it flow. Startups rising, small but shine. Your time is now, your stars align. Inventive journey, here we go. Through highs and lows, we let it flow. Startups rising, small but shine. Your time is now, your stars align. Your time is now, your stars align. Your time is now, your stars align.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Matthew Fornaro. And Matthew started his journey, in his own words, was a big nerd growing up in high school, took way too many hard classes, took a lot of AP classes, and then ended up going off after that to a local college there in Florida. Got a political science degree, and afterwards went to the University of Florida doing law school there, and actually studied IP for a bit of time until he realized that the science backgrounds didn't quite match up, so shifted a bit there, and then graduated, worked for a couple firms, and then a couple larger firms doing some complex litigation. And then around 2015, had a chance to go to a very large firm, but decided he wanted to do his own thing and started that, and has been doing it ever since. So with that much is just a quick introduction. Welcome on the podcast, Matthew.
Thank you for having me, Devin. That's a pretty good sum up of the last 30 years plus.
Oh,
So pretty good.
everybody's life can fit into 30 seconds if you try really hard. But no, it's just the quick overview. But why don't we rewind and unpack that a little bit and tell us a little bit about your journey growing up as a bigger nerd in high school and taking lots of AP classes.
Yeah, so I'm from South Florida. I've lived here since I was 6 years old. I live one town over from where I grew up, but I still hang out in the town I grew up in. So, growing up, I was a big nerd. And when I got to high school, I went into all my gifted classes, and then I took a lot of AP classes that I had no business taking, with like no real like end game plan on why I was taking them other than just for taking them sake. And that probably killed a lot of my social life in high school, that I could have had more fun doing stuff. So I graduated high school, had a lot of credits to bring to college, but I knew when I was ready to go to college that I was way too immature and was not ready to go off somewhere to college. So I went to Florida Atlantic University, which is only about a half hour away from my parents' house, and had fun there. It was a great time. I graduated in 3 years instead of four because all my credits and other stuff. And it was good. I was a political science major. I did a lot of stuff when I was there, had a lot of extracurricular activities, and it was a pretty good decision in retrospect. And I
Just maybe
knew.
one question on that. When
Sure.
political science, I will plead ignorance. The only people that I know that go into political science, and I'm sure that there are others, are they're going into politics or they're going into being a law when they take that. Was that the case? In other words, was the intent that you knew you were going in that direction, or is it just something that you found interesting that you just happened to line up later on?
Well, it's something, I always found politics and stuff like that interesting, but I knew I was going to go to law school. Otherwise, I would have gotten like a quote unquote useful degree. But political science is like either you're going to Washington, D.C. or into politics or you're going to law school. I mean, it's only a two-lane highway. There's one of two choices. If you're a political science major, you're not going to do that and go, start like an AI startup or something as a political science major. So,
All right, then I feel vindicated. My bias of not know or my ignorance has been confirmed. So
yeah,
no, go
no, it's
ahead. So
true. I mean, yeah, if you're a political science major, I mean, those are the only two things you're doing. I mean, unless I'm wrong, and I went to school, obviously, I know a lot of political science majors, and they're doing one of two things. So
fair
some of
enough.
them are
So
doing both at the same time. So,
yeah,
but
all those dang politicians, they usually start out as lawyers.
yeah,
So
all those lawyer politicians who
that's
are
right.
political
So
science.
that's so you went into the political science, and then I jumped in, but pick up and kind of
Yeah,
I
no.
hinted at it, I
So
guess. But you went off to law school.
yeah, so then, I went off to law school, and before, when I was going to law school, I was way into like international law because, that's something I studied in undergrad. And apparently, you can't actually make a living doing that, and that's not really something you can focus on in law school. There's one class for international law. I got an A in it, which was pretty good considering I took it in undergrad too. But in law school, we had an IP certificate program, and I was pretty interested in IP law. So I decided to take the certificate program. Essentially, it's like the equivalent of getting an LLM, but it's part of your JD degree. And so basically, you have to do an extra 2 semesters of just IP stuff. But again, did it in 3 years instead of four. So the only issue is, as you pointed out, they don't tell you that a lot of doors that go to IP law, in the real world require a science degree. So you can't really touch any patents or do any patent litigation or any stuff like that. So it's kind of, I have this awesome IP background, which is totally obsolete now, but I never really got a chance to use it as much as I wanted to. So when I graduated, I worked for a couple small firms doing like,
So just before you touch it, was it just did your professors not realize that at the law school, or was it over? Or I'm just curious because that's a long way. You're right. And so just as a quick background for the audience, to be a patent attorney, you have to have a technical undergraduate. So usually it's engineering. You can do math, physics, and a couple other ones. Otherwise, and not only that, then you have to sit for a second additional bar exam. So everybody has to do a bar exam. For those that are lucky enough or unlucky enough to go into IP law, you have to go and take a patent bar, which is with the USPTO or US Patent and Trademark Office. And so they have their stringent requirements that if you're not eligible, you either go get another degree or you don't or aren't able to sit. But how did that kind of oversight just go unmissed for your whole time in law school?
well, it kind of while I was in there, they unveiled this science requirement regarding patents and like patent stuff. But they're like, oh yeah, you can do all other IP stuff. You don't need a
Uh,
science degree. But then like, it's like a three-legged chair, trademarks, patents, copyrights. Like one of the legs is missing, then all of a sudden, well, I'm up for an IP job, but this dude who can be a patent attorney is up for an IP job too. So are you going to take the guy who's has a one-third handicap or the fully complete IP attorney? So I've done, believe it or not,
gotcha.
I've done over my career, I've actually registered a few trademarks. I've done trademark litigation, I've done copyright litigation, I've done a lot of trade secret litigation and unfair competition litigation, but never patent litigation because I'm not ever going to go there. And obviously, I never did any patents or anything because I'm not allowed to. But yeah, they kind of skirted over that issue,
Gotcha.
and that's kind of
Yeah,
something
which
that,
is technically accurate. I think I've known one trademark attorney in my career that is only trademark. So in other words, doesn't do any patents, doesn't do any mixture of IP. And so to your
yeah,
point, could you technically do it? Technically, they didn't lie to you, but as a
yeah,
general real world thing, it's like, well, to your
yeah.
point, if I could
And
hire
then
someone that could do everything or just do part of it, and I'm going to pay them the same, why wouldn't I hire everything? So that makes
yeah,
more sense.
exactly.
So gotcha.
Particularly when the patent litigation stuff is probably the most lucrative IP
Mm.
stuff you can get into if you get into big time, obviously patent litigation. But I mean, it was to the point where like I was also considering like if I really wanted to pursue IP stuff or whatever, like go back and get a master's in like some easy science genre and then go sit for the patent bar. So that was like a little inkling that I had too. But then I was just like, man, I'm done with school, like I'm not going back to do whatever. If I'm precluded from doing it, then I'm precluded from doing it. But like I said, I've been able to do some of it through my career, which is, okay. But
So now just one, sorry, not to jump in, one follow-up. So did you, as you came to that realization, was it, and you started to touch on it, you graduated, was the shift from IP to more so what you focus on now? Is that kind of after law school, you figured out, okay, maybe reality doesn't match what they told me, or was that during law school that you kind of made that shift?
no, that was like after law school when I was like, you know, as you pointed out, like you're kind of handicapped trying to be an IP attorney and be like a recent graduate IP attorney and whatever, and like look for that kind of job when you're up against people who can do the patent component too and the patent litigation stuff. So, I mean, there's people I've encountered now, I mean, there's a lot of attorneys I've met through like the last 23 years that do IP stuff that don't have a science background, but they don't do any patent stuff or whatever, but they're very like niche and like they're some of them are part of like big firms so they don't have to worry about like generating work or stuff like that. So it is what it is, but it's interesting because out in the job market I actually had an awesome potential job that I did not get involving trademark application and registration stuff right when I graduated, but I did not get that job and that kind of like shut the door on my IP centric career. So I basically, got into like civil litigation. And then during the course of civil litigation, I'm like, well, I want to go work for, I got to work for a big law firm. That's everyone's dream, work for a big law firm. So I went and I worked
It's your
for,
dream when you graduate. I don't know, so dream forever, but yes,
yeah,
go
no, it's
ahead.
like a pre-law school, law school slash graduation dream. And then once you get into it, you're like, it's not so great. Um, so, I went out and I worked for one like AmLaw 200 law firm. And, it was like, okay, whatever. And then after a couple of years, I was like, I had the opportunity to work for a bigger AmLaw 200 law firm and arguably more prestigious. So I was like, okay, I just took my you know, stuff and went over there. And then after a couple of years there, I don't want to say plateaued, but essentially I mean, there's only so far you can go as a associate attorney. So then it's like time to get into their weird firm economics of partner, whatever that term means, or shareholder, whatever that term means, because every firm has a different definition of what that means and what it entails, and the weird economics that go into it, and the secret formulas and all kinds of stuff. So then I was
I'm
like,
just
all
laughing
right,
because I've been there too. I worked for a large law firm, so it makes sense.
yeah, so
So
it's
yeah,
all
go ahead.
100% true. This is all stuff that, people don't know unless you're there. And then when you're there, like strangely, if you're staying there, it seems normal. But then on the outside, objectively looking at it, you're like, what the hell is going on there? So,
Exactly.
just real
It's
quick,
like
like I
nobody
remember,
like all you know is you're up for partner at one point and yeah, you may talk with people. You have no other idea what goes into that, especially
Yeah.
until you become partner. And if you don't, then it's well, here are some other options which you can do for a few years, but really, if you don't become partner, see you later. So, no, just very reminiscent of or crossroads that I had to face. So, didn't mean to
Yeah,
interject,
no,
but just laughed
very
along with you.
sounds very familiar, but it's also, you know, also with the economics too of being an attorney in a big firm, it's all about, your alleged salary, your alleged billing requirements that mysteriously aren't written down anywhere, so you can't prove that you hit them or didn't hit them. And then your bonus where, the secret math formulas and stuff are utilized, and then the bonus you think you're getting not necessarily is the one you are because they move the goalposts on you, and then you find out that Bob in Tampa had a bad year. So because Bob in Tampa had a bad year and you had a good year, we got to level it out. So your bonus is X instead of Y, or Y instead of X. So so that kind of got to me after a little while, and then I was like, I had the opportunity to work for one of the 10 biggest law firms in America, doing like the same kind of commercial litigation and like the finance litigation and stuff that I was doing. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to make more money. But then am I going to be in the same position like 2 or 3 years from now where it's like time to like, okay, well, if you're going to be a partner, you need to do like an equity buy-in and all this other stuff. And essentially you're married to us for the rest of your life and you have to buy your way out or whatever, or, do something different. So I knew like that was probably the last opportunity in my life that I could, with as little, obviously risk, but as little risk as going forward of going out and starting out on my own. So I decided to go out on my own. And then I decided to, you know, base myself out in the suburbs because the metropolitan area is oversaturated and like the suburbs are filled with like, attorneys who maybe aren't as practice specific or whatever you want to call it as people who are like in the major metropolitan areas or whatever. And then I decided that I wanted to focus on helping like small businesses, entrepreneurs, and startups because I felt that they were underserved by big firms and by attorneys who are located outside of like metropolitan areas. And also going into like a backstory of when growing up, my dad had a small business and I saw issues that he dealt with regarding like dealing with like professionals like accountants and attorneys because my dad made pretty good money. He's retired now. But he wasn't like big enough to be on their radar, so he had to have his local attorney help him, who was a nice guy but really wasn't attuned to like business law or business issues or whatever. So that's why I was like, all right, let me do what I've learned and focus and help out small businesses. And at the same time, too, I had to go figure out how to run my own business because I had no business education or anything like that. So that was a whole nother challenge and learning curve that, 10 years later, I'm pretty good. But, when I started out, I had no idea what I was doing.
No, and a lot of what I said is interesting, the different routes we take, and yet the commonalities. One of the things that you touched on that, I guess, question that I'd had, and it's rewinding just a little bit, was so you watch the movies, TV shows, and even you talk with a majority of attorneys, it is I'm not agree with it, but the pinnacle to make it to the huge law firm and to become a partner, that's what you're supposed to go or gear towards. And once you make it there, success rains down from the skies. They make a lot of, you're rich beyond your wildest dreams. Not all of that is true, but that's kind of the perception. And I know people that are at large law firms. I have friends there that when I used to work from large law firms that stayed there and have been successful. But, when you reach that point and you're, as you said, hey, this is the last chance. If I'm going to be all in or out, if I go in, they're going to keep me in and drag me back in and, kind of like the mafia. And if I'm out,
Yeah.
then I got to get out now before I get jumped in. So how did you, was that an easy decision or how did you decide, I'm going to do it now and be all in and kind of walk us through a little bit of that thought process?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like a flip the coin and we'll see what happens kind of thing. I mean, it was like it was a, it was a weeks long process because I had my job offer in like I knew I was kind of done at my current firm because I knew one of my big clients that or I was working on was like ready to jump ship, and I knew like I better figure out to make a move or something before like the I try to open the door and it doesn't work anymore and my internet's cut off. So I kind of, kind of made the overtures to do that. And luckily, I got a really good job offer. But at the same time, too, then like metaphysically, I'm thinking like, well, is third time the charm? I mean, I've gone to one big firm, whatever, went to another big firm, whatever, and now I'm going to a bigger firm. And is it going to be like a whatever moment where like, from there I can go to like maybe like one of five firms in like New York or Washington, D.C., because there's not much bigger than where I was going? Or, do I go out into the world of business that I know nothing about and, be my own boss or whatever? And, I mean, I grew up and saw my dad be his own boss or whatever, but like not as an attorney. So, it was a very deliberative but speedy process because time was ticking. So I mean, I went over everything with obviously my wife and kind of like my parents a little bit, getting some insight from them. But like my parents aren't attorneys; they have no idea what the hell attorney stuff is or whatever, how to generate attorney business. So I mean, I was like, all right, look, I'll give it a shot and see what happens. And then I know if I succeed or fail, it's because I wasn't good enough. So, or if I fail, I should say I wasn't good enough. So, I mean, like I shocked the partner who hired me by like saying like I'm going to start my own firm. And he's like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure." And he's like, "All right, well, you're a great candidate, whatever, but good luck." And I mean, he wasn't pissed or anything, but like nobody, it's like nobody says no to them. So, and that started my process of starting my own firm. And like I said, it was a huge learning curve to figure out how to run your own business and how to do your own business, particularly because my entire life, other than seeing my dad do business, I had no business education whatsoever. I had no business classes in high school, college, law school, and my practice of being an attorney was all about doing law stuff, not about business generation, particularly because even if I generated business at a big firm, I didn't see the financial return on it because, like I said, Bob in Tampa had a bad year, so my money's got to go cover him. So, I never had to generate business or anything. So it's, that was all stuff I had to do essentially on the job training and, figure out what to do.
So now, just curious, because and I agree, and just as an FYI, I did do the JD and MBA, so I took all the business classes. It's kind of like law school. You learn like 10% of what you actually need to know, and then everything else you have to figure out when you're in
Yeah.
practice. Business is a lot the same way. Law school utterly doesn't prepare you, at least in my opinion, at all for running or being an attorney, especially on
Mhm.
the business side. I mean, even if you're in a large firm, those that do the best are going to be the ones that are, are the ones that bring in the clients, right? In other words, the ones that have the power of the firm, make the decisions, get the best compensations, are almost, not always, but almost always the rainmakers and figure out the business side of how do I go and figure out, find clients, how do I retain them, how do I, generate them. And the attorneys that don't, you're usually just kind of the ones that do the grunt work, and you always kind of are in the middle of the firm. But in all cases, I don't know that you ever really are prepared until you just jump in. So as you jump, how did you figure out all of the business side and how you're going to run the firm and focus it, doing all the business aspects, learning it all, and trying to service clients? Kind of walk us through a little bit as you got started.
Yeah, so a lot of like I said, we'll say on the job training or learning. Luckily, I found two programs that help small businesses and entrepreneurs, and they're free, which is even better, learn about like business education in like a very truncated format. So one was the Fast Track program by the Kauffman Foundation, which is nationwide, and I did it through Broward County, which is the county I'm in. And essentially, it teaches you like everything you need to know about being a small business owner in like one semester. So I did that, and that was tremendously helpful. And then after that, I did a similar program, but a little bit different, a little bit more nuanced and stuff through the Florida State University Jim Moran, formerly College of Business. Now it's its own college, College of Entrepreneurship, and did that program, which was also free, which was 1 semester long. And that kind of filled in any holes that the first program I did left. And so basically, I got like the formal business education I needed while I was still running my business doing stuff. And it was really helpful. And that kind of gave me the practical real world education, at least in theory, on what I was missing. And then obviously other stuff is stuff I learned while, trial and error, which, unfortunately it was trial and error. And like I said, on the job training stuff about how to run a business and what goes into it. And, essentially it's been refined over the last 10 plus years to the point where now, I think I'm pretty efficient. I think I know what I'm doing business wise, whatever. And I think it's a lot easier now with even more proliferation of technology and stuff than even it was 10 years ago when I started out.
No, and I think you hit on. I mean, one is for better and for worse, and I would say a lot for better. Like YouTube is a great, or a lot of online. I just using YouTube example. There's a lot of material, a lot of great information, a lot more courses, a lot more informal education that brings you up to speed. But I think that is much more recent development, and even AI to a degree. Although I mixed bag on that. I don't, or we'll dive into there. But so I think that they're doing that formalistically, you have a lot of those advantages, probably more continuing to grow and become advantageous. But to make that leap, you kind of trial by error as well as take some courses and otherwise get some a more formalistic education. Now walk through so from there, where did the firm go? Was it you figured things out, rocket ship to the top? It was still figuring out how to do the business side, almost teetering on the verge of bankruptcy. Still don't know to this day, or kind of walks through, catch us up, kind of that process through today.
Yeah, so, obviously it was a lot of implementation of what I learned and then, figuring out stuff, like I said, through trial and error and stuff like that. Where luckily, I've been in business for this is year 11. I've made more revenue every year that I've been in business in the prior year, except for one. And I mean, the first couple of years it was rough and it was lean. And I mean, I was out there doing as much work as I could, and I, was representing clients I didn't really want to be representing, and like, doing essentially whatever it took to survive, even though, it's like I live in Parkland, Florida. It's not really rough. Okay. So, but I didn't, I'm for adversity's sake or whatever, it really wasn't adverse. I mean, I always had my parents and my in-laws and my family I could always rely on, but it wasn't like, people who were really out on their own doing stuff or whatever. But still, it's you go from making a really good six-figure salary to zero and having to build it back up again. So it took a while to build it back up again. Luckily, it's been built up, again, and I do pretty well, thankfully. Um, and I keep doing better every year because I keep getting more and more refined as far as business practice, legal practice, things like that. But yeah, it was rough the first few years, like real rough. And you know, luckily my wife always worked, so we always had her income and we always had her benefits and everything. And she still works now, and it's great. But I mean, it was all kind of it wasn't a lightning in a bottle moment. It's just been slow and steady progress the whole time.
Yeah, and that's I think what a lot of people find. I mean, a couple of things that you'd hit on is one is you get into starting your own firm, and I think a lot of attorneys think, well, I can do really good legal work and I'm successful at a firm, and that is just a small fraction of what you have to figure out. In other words, when you're used to being fed work. Half the time, attorneys don't even do don't know how to do a filing, run a docket because you have people to do that. You have paralegals, and you have other people that run your docket, do reminders, follow up with clients, and you just do the legal work and you get in. And especially when you're starting from scratch, you don't have that infrastructure, those people in place. So definitely figuring those things out along the way. But it also seems like it's one where it takes a long time to build momentum, no matter how good you are at it. You're very seldom, unless you just have a huge book of business and decide to go out on your own. Most of the time, you have to start small and you have to build up that clientele. And then eventually that clientele will start to have repeat business, or they'll be referring to you by word of mouth, or you'll start to get people that are giving you good reviews and building your presence up and that. But that takes a long period of time, and that's why I think a lot of times attorneys tend to perish. So it sounds like it's one where certainly had an opportunity, and you made it, or plowed through that, so to speak, and made it through. So now catch us up. Where are things at today? And if you're to look kind of out at the next 6 to 12 months, where do you think or see things headed?
Sure. So, like I said, luckily, I've made more revenue every year. I mean, I've gotten, I think, better at business every year. I'm not necessarily a better attorney than I was 10 years ago or even I mean, there's only so far you can go as learning stuff, doing stuff, whatever. Um, but, I like where I am now. I've done a lot of um technology integration over the last year that I'm really into, like particularly a lot of AI stuff, but like in a reasonable, responsible way, not like these way when you see like people, like in the legal practice, these attorneys who use like ChatGPT to draft their pleadings and then like hand it to the court. And they're like, oh, looks good to me, and they get sanctioned or whatever. Don't do that. I'm always responsible for all my stuff. But just a lot of technology integration. Like I said, like when we were talking a few minutes ago, it's the technology, although particularly the AI stuff is like overwhelming the amount of stuff there is now and the amount of stuff coming at you. But it really does make my job as a business owner and an attorney a lot easier than it was when I started even 10 years ago. So, I'm just perfecting that moving forward and, focusing on a lot of things this year as far as like perfecting my Google business profile, uh, working on perfecting my social media and other stuff that I've had out there that I'm now really focusing on working on where I have technology now that really helps me do that I didn't have previously. And then obviously from the law practice side, integrating in a lot of the new technology that they have out there that's specific for law stuff, which makes things, like I said, way easier than they were definitely 23 years ago when I started being an attorney, and definitely 10 years ago when I started on my own. And just, continue to go forward and, get bigger, I don't want to say better clients, but, bigger clients, bigger matters, and, refer out stuff that I used to take myself that I don't necessarily need to do anymore and just keep moving forward.
All right. Well, all I took away from that is you're going to refer me a whole bunch of work that you don't want to do anymore. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
But no, that's awesome. No, and the only I would say question mark, and I think that it's a lot of industries will, and I'm not going to dive into it because it would be a long conversation another time with the AI stuff. Is I think that there is a lot of cool tools, a lot of things that used to have a big amount of staff and a lot of people to do. You can utilize those tools responsibly, and totally agree on that. To get a lot more things done with a lot less overhead and more efficiently, and probably better. But it'll be interesting to see how that migrates over into whether or not that starts to replace attorneys or is a tool to reduce costs or otherwise be more efficient. So I'm jury's out on that for me, but I'm interested to see how it plays out. But we'll table that conversation maybe for another day. But now, as we are wrapping towards the end of this episode, I always like to wrap up with the same two questions. So we're going to jump to those now. So the first question I'd like to ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? What'd you learn from it?
sure. So it was I would more characterize it as a worst series of decisions I ever made. And it was all, initially starting out like advertising and dumping money into print advertising, which is ridiculous in, 2015, let alone 2026. and different internet stuff and different you know like law platforms, which I don't want to name any names, but I think if you're an attorney, you know the websites I'm talking about and the things I'm talking about, where they make a lot of promises and literally do not deliver, particularly if you're in a field like I'm in, like business law, commercial litigation, where it's not like a definite like bankruptcy or PI thing where it's like, something so easy or whatever to make a match that, whatever. So wasted a ton of money in that, a ton of money that I wish I had back. And I try to help when I see people who are starting up their own firms or whatever. I try to give them friendly advice not to, to figure out in a reasonable manner what works for them, but I point out what didn't work for me. So,
No, and I smile because I learned a lot of those same things. I mean, we did at one point, and again, like if I wish I didn't spend a lot. I did test things out, but we did radio at one point. Radio didn't work. We did billboards. It was a digital billboard, so it was a lot lower ad spend, but
um,
those didn't work. And yet, it's one where you think that I don't see these very often. This is a new and untapped market. And sometimes that's true, and we found things that work that are untapped, and other
yeah,
times there's a reason why it's untapped, and yet to a degree, you can get advice, and I think also to a degree, I found at least for me, it's as much of fitting within what the firm is, who they focus, my personality, where I can drive the value, where that we can convey that value, and it's not even the same between. You can be in the same industry, and you may have different avenues that just resonate better with you and the firm. So it is one where I'm right there with you. That's an easy place to mistake or to make mistakes, especially as you're getting started, but one where almost everybody has to just because you have to figure out
yeah,
what works and there's iteration that goes in. So that's a great one to learn from. Second question now that I like to ask. So now if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one rule of thumb you'd recommend?
sure. I mean, this is, what I do now is, like I said, help small, medium-sized startups and entrepreneurs with their stuff. I mean, obviously, the number one thing that I would say before you do anything or whatever is have a written business plan, which is fundamental and it's taught in every business school that I found out later. And in the two programs I went to, is you have to have a very detailed and organic and living business plan that you update regularly, no matter how long you're in business. And that's essentially your roadmap that you use to figure out the who, what, when, where, why, how, everything about your business and everything that you're going to do stems from that written business plan.
No, and I think that's a great one. The caveat, or probably the addition, not caveat, addition I'd give, even if you can use AI to do a business plan, do it yourself. And more so, I think it's for that exercise, right? So I think, you could go in and I'm sure I could say, hey, I wanted to do a business plan for starting an intellectual property firm and I want to start or focus on startups and small businesses. And ChatGPT would spit something out, and it probably, if I were to read it, would say, it's not a bad idea and you can utilize it as a tool. But I think that exercise of having to figure out, hey, where do I want to focus? Who do I want to focus on? How am I realistically going to approach those and all that? I think going through that exercise for any business is going to be one where AI can't replace it. And even if it does, it's not going to fit you. So I think that's definitely a great rule of thumb and a great takeaway. Well, now as we do wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Sure, just go to my website, which is finarolegal.com. I'm on every known form of social media and I'm out there, so I'm very easy to find. You can Google me, but just go to my website and it's got all my contact information and all my stuff.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, support a great business, expand their network, and if nothing else, make a new best friend. So, with that, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been a fun, it's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So let's go to inventiveunicorn.com, apply to be on the show. Couple more things as listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review, helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And along that note, if along your journey you ever need help with patents or trademarks or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
All right. Thank you, Devin. Thank you for having me.
The road ain't straight, it's got a bend. Dreams of seeds we plant, my friend. Dusty boots, but a heart of gold. Your story's waiting to be told. Inventive journey, here we go. Through highs and lows, we let it flow. Startups rising, small be shine. Your time is now, your stars align. Cowbell ring and feel the beat. Hustle hard, don't take a seat. Every step you're blazing trail. Inventive journey never fails.